Okay, well, let's get started, seeing as it's 10 a.m., or at least 10 a.m. in BC. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is going to be a short presentation, an overview of SharePoint 2010, and the way that SharePoint 2010 can be used to help you with your business. And what we're going to look at, first off, a little bit of background about myself. My name is Bruce Redfern. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I've been training Microsoft technologies for over 15 years now. And I'm also holder of several Microsoft certifications, which actually I'm required to because I am a trainer. I've been working with the SharePoint product since SharePoint 2003, and currently getting up to speed on SharePoint 2013, in fact, which is the next version. It's coming out either very late this year or early next year. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Sometime by the middle of next year would be a better estimate of when it will actually be released. But in any case, SharePoint 2010 is the current version and has a number of features that will be useful to you in your organization. So I'm going to go through the product at an overview level and tell you about those features. Hopefully I'll get some time for a little bit of demo in there as well. If you were watching the presentation before I started, you noticed that there was a mechanism there for asking questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask during the presentation, please use that chat facility and use as a way to prompt or to ask the questions, and we will try to field those questions at the end of the presentation, and if not, we'll get back to you after the presentation. So we need to know that. We need to know what questions you have. I do have one here, and I'm just answering it. Someone's asking if it's possible to use a phone, and I don't believe it is. You need to use the integrated conferencing capability here. Okay, so let me dive into the content here. So SharePoint and Microsoft Office 2010, as you probably are aware, you may not be aware, so I should be clear about this. SharePoint is considered to be part of the Office 2010, or SharePoint 2010, I should say, is considered to be part of the Office 2010 suite. That is to say, it's not obviously a desktop application like Word or Excel, but Word and Excel and Outlook and PowerPoint and so on are SharePoint aware, and SharePoint is aware of those applications so that I can store Word documents and Excel spreadsheets on my SharePoint site. By saving them from Excel, I can open them from the SharePoint site into Excel. If I've required that somebody fill in information about a document that they're saving, such as their document number, their project number or their PO number or something like that, then I can integrate that information gathering into SharePoint and have Office enforce it. So when the person opens the document or saves the document to that SharePoint site, they'll be required to enter that information. So they've done a lot of work with SharePoint 2010 to integrate it with Office. SharePoint has gone through a number of revisions. I mentioned that I had started with the 2003 product. There was a product even before that. So over time, SharePoint has been evolving, and the SharePoint 2010 version, what you see on screen here is sort of where they were working on, what they were looking at as they were implementing Office 2010 and SharePoint 2010. So basically, after they had released SharePoint 2007, they figured out what areas they wanted to innovate on. They did some development on that, obviously. The other products that were being released are not at the same time, where they allowed you to use SharePoint Online. So you can now sign up through Microsoft's online hosting facility to have your own SharePoint site there. You can still host it in premises, of course. They integrated Microsoft Office Communication Server and made that eventually, evolved that into the Link product, if you will. SharePoint and Office 2007 had a service pack come out. SharePoint Office 2010 was released in technical preview in 2009, in beta in late 2009, and then was finally released in 2010. Part of what they did with the SharePoint 2010 was they implemented or integrated this fast search server, which gives us some additional searching capabilities, thumbnail previews of documents, being able to page through a document while you're just in the search phase without actually opening the document and so on. And of course the SharePoint Online is now using the 2010 version. So if you use SharePoint Online, it's going to look very similar to your on-premises SharePoint implementation if it's 2010. So they did some other work as well. Of course, they did some major work on Project and some major work on Visio in 2010. So the whole product suite has been updated. So part of what SharePoint is trying to do is make people productive. Right? We're trying to make it easy for them to collaborate. One of the challenges to that, of course, is that business organizations are more complex these days. We have situations where we need to work with our customers, with our partner organizations, and we also have, the modern working style of people using mobile devices, rating things, providing feedback online, that sort of thing. And we may also need to comply with regulations such as, archiving documents or retaining documents for a certain length of time, and having a document repository, a published document repository. We're also trying to integrate line of business systems, so we'll have things like our CRM or our ERP or our HR system that we need to show, or that our customers or our users need to have access to, but we'd like to show that information inside our SharePoint site. So that integration of those line of business systems is possible with SharePoint. It has been since 2007, essentially, but 2010 takes it one step further to make it easier to retrieve and display that external data. We can also scale. So if we get an influx of employees, we can add new capacity to our SharePoint site to handle those new employees by adding new web servers, for example. We also have the ability to extend SharePoint, so we're not stuck with essentially the way it came from Microsoft. We can add new features that were either written by ourselves, by our own development team perhaps, or by an external contractor. So the innovation capability is there, and we also have the ability to protect intellectual property through SharePoint using digital rights management. So what I can do is have a document on my SharePoint site that a user can view but can't print, for example. And if they attach it to an email and send it to somebody else, that other person won't be able to view that document either unless they are able to prove their identity to the document, to the digital rights management server and get a decryption key. So I can control who can see a document and what they can do with that document and thereby protect intellectual property. These things are all integrated into SharePoint 20, or integratable with SharePoint 2010, I should say. So SharePoint 2010 is designed to provide facilities in a number of different ways. One is of the site infrastructure. So with sites, I can give people a place to go for their department, for their group, for their project. I can develop communities inside SharePoint 2010 and have people interact with one another and designate each other as colleagues and have a place where they can share information through there. I can do content management. So I can allow just a standard sharing of documents. You upload a Word document and other people can see it. Or I can do content management where if you upload that document, it needs to be reviewed by somebody and approved before everybody can see it, for example. And I can also do content management in the sense that I can have versioning on those documents. So I can have version 1 of the document, and then you edit it and save it, it becomes version 2, and we can still go back and look at version 1. Or I can even have minor versions where you edit it and it becomes version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 until you finished, and then you designate it as published, and then it becomes version 2.0. All of which can be subject to approval and subject to workflows where people get notified by email that this document needs to be approved. It also integrates a search facility, so every document that I save into SharePoint, I can find through its search facility. The search facility and the documents that are visible to the users are limited to those that the user is allowed to see. So if a document resides in a document library that a user does not have permission to, then they will not come up in the search results. But the search results themselves can be quite powerful, quite rich in the sense that it can provide previews of those documents so the user can search on a keyword and then look through the documents without opening them and go, oh yeah, that's the one that looks like the one I'm looking for, and then open it in the appropriate application. Using external data, I can provide insights into the state of our business, and I can put composite data together. I can build a dashboard up which pulls data in from many different parts of my business. This allows me to connect and empower the people. Obviously, they can connect through the SharePoint site. They can share information through there. They can comment on each other's content. They can review content. They can, it can be approved if that's necessary. And that gives us sort of one central location for people to work with, rather than multiple locations across the business. And also, with the search facility, it somewhat simplifies the method of them finding that document. So they know a presentation was uploaded. They can search on the name of the document, but they can also search on the contents. So they know that the document is on the SharePoint site, and it is, for example, concerned with the Peabody account. Well, they can search for the word Peabody and find all documents that contain a reference to the word Peabody, and they can limit that down and say, just show me Word documents, or just show me documents that were written by John, right, or were created in the last 2 weeks, or something like that. So that search facility gives them good access to that information. So that unified infrastructure, SharePoint, allows me to concentrate my development and integration and collaboration efforts through that one place, and therefore not have to spend a lot of time learning different technologies and getting people up to speed. And I can also, through that facility, respond fairly rapidly to business needs. So if a new department gets created or a new project gets created, I can build them a SharePoint site very quickly using that built-in content capability of SharePoint. Some things that have changed a little bit about SharePoint 2010 from 2007, if you're familiar with 2007, is that they now have a ribbon user interface. Now, the ribbon was introduced, of course, in Office 2007, but didn't make it into SharePoint with the 2007 revision. With 2010, in the Office suite, the ribbon is ubiquitous across all of the products, and it has been integrated into SharePoint as well. Just a quick view of that. If I go to a team site, for example, here's my team site, and here's the ribbon across the top, which gives me sort of a similar kind of interface to working with Word or with Excel or something like that. And if I go to a document library, I see the same kind of ribbon-based interface that gives me the ability to do things like work with the documents that are in there or work with the document library itself. So that ribbon interface is now part of the SharePoint UI. The user interface has been updated and uses Silverlight and Ajax, which means that if I do something that requires input, what I will get, let's do an edit properties here, I will get what's called a pop-over screen. Right, so the original screen is sitting behind, and I can sort of reference it if I need to. What was it I was doing? Right, and it's asynchronous, which means that the page doesn't need to refresh if I make a change to the document, for example. And it has intuitive site editing, theming, and publishing, which means that I can do things now like edit the page or edit a site. Let me just go back up to the top site here. And I can edit this page directly through here and start typing in new code, new text if I want to, without having to learn another product. There is another product that gives us more comprehensive editing capability, SharePoint Designer. But as far as just making simple changes to your site, welcome to your new site. If I want to make that change, save and close, and now I've made a change to the site without having to learn any editing tools. So that's the intuitive site editing. I can also change the theme over the site, and I can also do publishing, so I can have content approval, for example. My Office integration is very good with this product as well, so I can use the content and data across the client and the server. As an example here, if I'm in a document library and I'm looking at a Word document, I can choose, let me do it with the Excel document, I can choose to view it in the browser. That's going to use the integration of what they call Office Web Applications to display this Excel spreadsheet right in my browser. Or if I choose to, I can use the context, and that service has to start up. I should have started that already. But there we go. There's the Excel spreadsheet sitting in my browser. Right? I can also open it in Excel directly, of course, if I need to work with it and edit the document. So I've got two different ways of accessing the document. And I can do it through the web browser, or I can do it through the Office application. So that integration between Office and SharePoint is pretty strong. And also within the Office applications, I can save to SharePoint. So if I'm running something like Word, and I create a new document, so new document, when I go to save it, I can save and share it and save it to SharePoint, and then choose where I want to save it on SharePoint. And this is all integrated. So if I do that save as, new document.abc in my shared documents library, actually that wasn't the one I want to save it to, let's try that again, save to SharePoint, oh yeah, that is the one I wanted. Okay, so let me just see if that actually showed up. I go back to my site, shared documents, and do a refresh here, and there's my new Word document sitting in the library. Right? So the integration with Office is very good, and this gives sort of an enhanced experience for the users. But I can also take that content offline. So the user may, for example, be someone who travels as part of their job function. Well, using SharePoint Workspace, I can say I'd like to take this content with me when I leave the office. So SharePoint Workspace is part of the SharePoint suite here. If I go to the library and I say I want to sync this to my SharePoint Workspace, right, I can see these documents. Now, these would be available to me even if I'm not on the Office network. So I can open up this new document.docx here, make some changes to it, save it, save that, and then when I'm back in the office, it'll be synchronized back with the SharePoint server. Now, right here, I can't simulate being out of the office because I'd lose connectivity to both. But in the work environment, right, people will say, well, this content I need when I'm outside the office. So that's the SharePoint Workspace capability. They also have cross-browser support, so they now support Chrome and Safari and Firefox. And that mobile-based interaction across SharePoint and Microsoft Office allows me to access, my Word documents from the SharePoint site on my iPad, for example, and that works quite well. So that Microsoft Office Web Apps gives me that browser-based authoring. It also gives me co-authoring, which is something I need two people or two sessions to illustrate. So I won't try to show it to you now. But if I've got two people editing or want to edit the same document on the SharePoint site, they can do it simultaneously. The mechanism is there to lock the paragraph that I'm working on or the section of the Excel spreadsheet that I'm working on while somebody works on a different section of the same document. So they give a very good experience for those Office users. One of the other things that we can do with the site is we can do theming on the site. So this is a way to change the way that our SharePoint site looks without getting our IT help desk involved. I have the way to edit the page, as you saw me editing the text in that previous page. I can choose to change the theme on the site. I can embed a web part. This is a piece of functionality for SharePoint that allows me to show a video when the person opens the page. Right, so I have fairly good enhancing and design capabilities without ever getting IT help desk people involved, or IT people in general involved. Assuming somebody has site authoring capabilities, they can go in and make whatever changes are necessary. Just to show you this at the site level, if I go to my team site here and go to my site actions, site settings here, I can change the look and feel of the site. So I could change that theme, which is currently, sorry, that's just the list of themes, the look and feel. So I could change the site theme here to something else, like Grappello, for example, which uses a different selection of colors. I can even customize these color ranges if I like, change the fonts that are used on the site and so on, and preview what the site would look like in that particular scheme, and then decide if I want to keep that or not. And all of this is something that a site owner can do. They don't need to be an IT administrator or anything like that. If I plot my block up, so let's always allow pop-ups for this site. Yes, there we go. And let's see if it'll let me do it now. Do a quick preview of Grappello. Oh, that wasn't Grappello. Sorry. Grappello and a preview. There we go. thinking about. I may come back to that. Now, there we go. So there's the site with the Grappello color scheme. So I can decide to cancel that. So anyway, that's just to point out that it's relatively easy to change that theming. As far as putting in a video, I can insert, excuse me, a web part which allows me to do a video. So I can have a Silverlight web part inserted into the page, right, and then have it point it to a particular location and have that video show on my page. So I won't do that right now. We'll do a save and close here. Okay. We also have the ability, as I showed you, to connect the content to Office. That makes it easier for users who don't go to the SharePoint site all the time to be able to see the content without actually being in SharePoint. Let me just show you an example of this. If I go to my Shared Documents library that has those documents, if I go to the library, I can connect this to Office. So I can add it to my SharePoint site. Now what that means is, if I go to, for example, Word, or Excel, or any of the Office applications, let's go with Excel here, and I want to save my current file, I can save and send it to SharePoint, and it knows about those locations. So I can choose to add whatever sites I like there, but there is another aspect of this facility which allows me to actually connect it to Outlook, and then I can see it inside Outlook. Actually, I think I'll show you that briefly. So here's my Shared Documents library. I can say, connect this to Outlook. Right? And now in Outlook, I'll see another folder. Once it connects here, there we go. And now I see those same documents that are sitting on the SharePoint site inside my Outlook application. This applies not only to things like Word documents and document libraries, but also things like calendars. So I can take a calendar from my SharePoint site. Let's go back to my SharePoint site here, browse up to the Teams site. I have a calendar here. I can choose to connect this calendar to Outlook as well. And now I have an additional calendar in here, the one off the SharePoint site and the one off my Outlook implementation. Just to show you that these things are actually connected, because there's not much going on here, let me go to the Teams site and add an event. So for today, let's add an event starting at 10, SharePoint webinar, so from 10 to 10:45, 10:40, and save it. It's showing here on my SharePoint site. Go to the month view, and if I go to my Outlook and just do a refresh here, just a second. This will essentially show. It's going to show up on the second. Just to show you that it's bidirectional as well, I can edit or create items here as well, and they'll go back to the new meeting. They'll go back to the SharePoint site as well. So save and close that. So that shows here. Here's the SharePoint misspelling that I made earlier of the SharePoint webinar. Here's the new event. If I go to my SharePoint site calendar and refresh this page, I'll see the new meeting that I created in Outlook. So you have the facility to share things not just as a location, so I can share out of Office applications like Word and Excel, but also to integrate them into Outlook so that document libraries and calendars and task lists and things like that show up in my SharePoint, show up in my Outlook. And so they're visible in Outlook. So if you've got a user who spends most of their time in Outlook, right, you still can give them access to and allow them to use and facilitate their use of SharePoint content without them having to open a browser. Right? So if a person is browser-centric, you know, they prefer to be in the browser in the SharePoint site, they can do everything there. If they want to do it from Outlook, they can. So within the Office application here as well, you notice that we have that, as I showed you, that share sent us to a SharePoint. If I decide that a document library needs some additional information, such as a project number to go with the documents, I can add that as a column here. Create a column called project number, shall we say, and Office will enforce or display this information. So project number, I'll just leave it as the standard format for now, and OK. This becomes an additional piece of metadata or descriptive data for each document. If I open this document in Word, enable editing here, and go and look at the save and send, save to SharePoint, save as. This one now. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I missed one thing there. I needed to make that a mandatory field. So let me do that in here. In the library settings, in the column project number, let's make this a mandatory field. So require that the column contains information. Yes, okay. All right. So now, if I go back to that document library, which I just closed inadvertently, my apologies. I go back there to SP 2010 Web Frontend 1. There we go. I go back to the SharePoint site and go to the shared documents. You'll notice that I've got this project number field. If I go to the properties, I see the project number is starred. It has a requirement, so if I try to change something here, give it a title, for example, and try to save this, it's going to say you can't save that because you haven't provided a project number. Likewise, if I was to create a new document in this document library using Word, so I'm going to enable editing on this guy here, test doc, and save it to here. That's interesting. Not all demos go the way you want them to. Retry that one. So again. I don't know where my document went. Sorry about that. Team site, shared documents. Didn't actually get my new document. Save. Oh, that's why, because it's going to document. I see. All right, now I understand. So I actually need to send it to SharePoint. Sorry about that. So shared documents, save as. Okay. Cannot be saved because some properties are missing or invalid. So it's enforcing that project number. So I can go to the information panel, put in the project number in here, in Word, and then do my save. Save and send it to SharePoint to here, save as that. And now it has a project number property. If I close Word and go back to the site and refresh this page, there it is, sorry, it's already there. So here's the document and here's the project number that I entered. Okay? So that facility to capture metadata such as project number and so on, and directly from the Office application save into SharePoint gives me fairly rich collaboration capability. As I was mentioning, you have this SharePoint Workspace. If people tend to spend some time offline, they can take that content with them. SharePoint Workspace can synchronize content from SharePoint so that it's represented on the local machine. It also synchronizes changes, not the entire file. So if they add a comment to a file, when they get back and connect to the Office, it just sends the comment or the change to the document, not the whole document across. And it also integrates with InfoPath, so if you have forms that need to be filled out for that document to be saved, then that can be done as well. As you noticed, we have that ability to view content in the web server, in the web page, I should say, and also edit it in there, so that gives me web access. But I can also, using Office apps, get at content on mobile devices. So you might be holding a tablet, right? Be connected to the corporate SharePoint site, see a document, need to make a change, and be able to do it because you're essentially going to do it through a web page Right? That's what Office web apps are. You can also do searches through that mobile device. So if I need to find someone to communicate with them on the SharePoint site, I can do that. I can search against people, and I can search against SharePoint libraries. So that gives me good interactive capability with SharePoint from a mobile device. So you can use SharePoint to integrate and replace niche systems. You know, I developed this scheduling system for our consultants. Right? That can be brought into SharePoint. You've got basically, you then get the saving that the people already know how to use SharePoint, so you get a one-time training. You've got deployment choice, so you can deploy it on your own premises, or you can use Microsoft's hosted services, which gives you, freedom of basically peace of mind, because they're going to provide the hosting, they're going to do the backups, and so on. And there's a service level agreement associated with that. And because SharePoint is, a fully integrated product with a back-end server, you can do things like proactively monitor that. So you can determine if the SharePoint infrastructure that you have in place, for example, needs to be augmented with new web servers because the load is too great for the infrastructure that you have. So this is a little bit of a sales slide, but what they're pointing out is that SharePoint provides a lot of pieces as part of the one solution. So I've got a dashboard that I can provide to users. I've got a business form service, so if I need to have users fill out a form online, they can do that through my SharePoint site. I've got a search capability built into it. I've got social computing, which means I can do things like have communities, discussion boards. People can rate content and provide comments on it, which I didn't show you here, but I can rate a document here and say, sorry, I didn't mean to open that one. I can rate the document and say I like it. I can add a note to go with it. I'll get back to my site here a second. As soon as Word decides to leave the screen, here we go. So if I decide that I want to rate this, right, I've added a tag saying I like it. I can add additional tags and notes to that document. And so I've got social computing capability, or social networking capability built into the product. I'll wait for that to load. I've got search across the entire SharePoint content, but I can also search outside, so that's why we call this an enterprise search facility. So I can search in data which is not inside SharePoint. So if you have file shares, you can search those from your SharePoint site. The integrated capabilities of the product are there, so I can, for example, work with Office, reduce maintenance overall because you're just maintaining SharePoint. It is a relatively complex product, but it's simpler to manage than a suite of different products all connected together. I can do cross-farm management, and I can, that is, manage all of the servers in the farm from one place, and I can do cost-effective training because that interface will stay the same for all my users. And to some extent, that interface stays the same for your administrative folks as well. So I didn't show an administrative site here. I like it, so I'm just going to save that tag. If I go to my central administration page, this is where I make changes about the product, adding features and so on. When I look at site, let's see here, view all site collections, right? You'll see, actually that wasn't the one I wanted. I wanted web applications. Manage web applications, here we go. So you'll see that this interface for manage web applications is very much like the ribbon-based interface for the rest of SharePoint. When it comes up, there will be here across the top, as I select things, I'm getting a ribbon-based interface. Right, so I need to change authentication providers or general settings for this web application. It's the same basic layout and mechanism as the rest of SharePoint. And as I said, you've got the choice of if you want to host the enterprise on your own equipment. You can do it on-premise. You may have some requirements about where the data is located, so that might cause you to choose on-premise hosting. So on-premise, you can do your SharePoint server, of course, Exchange server, communication server. You can do a link server now, and in the hosted environment, if you choose to, Microsoft provides you the facility to host the SharePoint for you, to do your Exchange for you, and to do your your Office communications online as well, and Lync nowadays as well. So I can choose either of those environments, and you can use a mix. You don't need to be all on-premise or all hosted. For example, in our organization, we have on-premise for some content and hosted service for our communications component, for example. So you can mix and match as needed. If you're going to do an upgrade from SharePoint 2007, which is kind of what the left-hand window is looking like here, you can upgrade a server without changing the user interface and preview the new UI. You're not, of course, required, so you can decide, do I want to do that, or do I want to leave it looking like the old UI on the new server? So if you have SharePoint 2007 content and you're looking at that. You can also go into the central administration and see if there are any issues. So I was actually on that page a second ago. So here's my central administration. If I go back to this page, it says, okay, here's some issues that you have. Right, so there's an ongoing SharePoint Health Analyzer. You probably can't read that text there, but there's an ongoing SharePoint Health Analyzer that's looking at different categories of configuration and performance issues on your server and letting you know if there are any problems coming up, so you can take some action to deal with that. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, extend the SharePoint 2010 platform. Developers can code against it to provide new features. There's a better quality new debugging tools with SharePoint 2010. Debugging 2007 SharePoint was a bit of a difficult situation. People ended up having to run virtual machines in order to do any testing. But now they can debug against the web pages. You can set the web page up to show additional information when people connect to it. You can read and write line of business data from business connectivity services. So this can be data coming from an external SQL Server application or a line of business ERP or CRM solution, and you can expose that data onto your SharePoint site, but then the SharePoint data itself is also exposed through web services. So you can build another application that pulls data out of SharePoint. So it's not a dead-end solution. It can pull data in from outside, or you can pull data out of SharePoint and use it somewhere else. And if you need to make changes to SharePoint, there are things that you can do without writing any code using SharePoint Designer. For example, I can create new workflows. So you say, when a new document is received in this document library, these 3 people need to be notified, but I also need to send a copy over here and do some other work with the file, but only if it's, the value of the project is over $10,000. So you can build fairly complex workflows using SharePoint Designer. And you can also change the view of the page. So you can do simple branding and UI theming kind of operations through SharePoint Designer. And it's basically standards-based, so that makes it useful. So that integrated developer tool, if you've got things like you need to do a hiring process or a sales reporting or an IT service portal, you can build one of those using one of these SharePoint sites templates. You can build it just from standard components, or if you need to extend it, you can use Microsoft Visual Studio and build components that integrate with SharePoint, and you can also store and retrieve data from SQL Server as part of that business need. Your development team then has the ability to use the Visual Studio to work with components such as web parts that can be then deployed to SharePoint, and the developer dashboard on SharePoint allows them to do debugging against SharePoint when it's running. So they go to a page. I don't have time to show you this on the right-hand side here, but basically by switching on the developer dashboard, the person accessed the page on the right, and then below is information about what objects were retrieved, how long each object took to retrieve. There are millisecond ratings next to every object here, so that you can get a feel for, for example, what's slowing down a web page. People report they go to this page on your SharePoint site, and it takes 5 seconds to load, which is an eternity, I know, or a minute to load, let's say. You can then turn on the developer dashboard and find out which piece of that page is taking that long. And then drill down and find out why that piece is taking so long. Maybe it's a new web part that you've put in there that just shows a consolidated team calendar or something like that, but it's not working very well. And so you could drill down, that's the problem, and then maybe go and work on the code to see how you can improve that. So as I said, you can get data from outside, a SQL Server, line of business applications, web services that pull data in and show it in SharePoint lists. Right? And a lot of the work that you want to do, that you might want to do to customize SharePoint, can be done through SharePoint Designer without actually writing any code at all. Right? So solution development is only half the equation, of course. There is a lot of integration of standards into the product. So it uses XML, for example, uses XSLTs. It will deal with external data over ODBC connections. It'll use SOAP and other object access mechanisms for getting at the data. And it provides a web service to allow you to retrieve SharePoint data. So this was just as an overview. I hope you found this interesting, but SharePoint allows me to do this, connect and empower people, cut costs with that unified infrastructure, and respond rapidly to business needs. If you're looking at getting some SharePoint 2010 training for you or your users or your developers, there's a number of Microsoft official curriculum courses available that CDC Train Canada offers. I've listed the most common and up-to-date ones on the page here. There are more, so if you need to get a more comprehensive list of SharePoint, maybe you need some actual end-user training, we do offer those courses. You can go to http://www.traincanada.com and just simply search for SharePoint. That's about the simplest way to find our SharePoint offerings. So I'll just do a quick show you what that's all about there. And our webpage makes it relatively simple to find things. Right on the top, on the front page here, you can type SharePoint, for example. Do the search. This will show me all the SharePoint courses. Right? And then if I'm just interested in the 2010 ones, I can filter that list and just show the 2010 ones. So this would be end user SharePoint Designer courses, Introduction Level 1, that would be an end user course, and then those courses that I was just mentioning, the Microsoft official curriculum courses. So hopefully you found this presentation interesting. If you want to follow up with email questions, my email address was on the first slide, so let me show that to you again. And more than happy to take any emails like that that anybody has. Alex or Laura, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, just wondered if we had any questions that we have a couple of minutes here if anybody has any questions.
Yep. I don't see any questions yet.
Well, if there are no questions, all right, thanks, Alex. So if there are any questions, this brucer@traincanada.com, that's my email address. Of course, feel free to contact your account manager, and we'll be more than happy to help you with that or to point you towards the right SharePoint 20 training for your users or IT folks or your developers. Right? Just a word of sort of not necessarily caution, but you need to be aware that if you are going to implement SharePoint, it is a fairly large product. So you may have noticed in that list of courses that I gave you at the end here that there's a course, for example, just on search for application developers. There's a course on the fast search server, which is that added component that Microsoft added to SharePoint 2010 fairly near the end. There are courses for designing SharePoint infrastructure and configuring and administering SharePoint. That would be your IT folks. And there are courses for designing and developing applications. Right? So the application development and the IT administration and the end users are three different distinct audiences, and they break down even further. For example, on the IT side, you could have a search specialist, someone who just works on the search aspect of SharePoint. SharePoint is a big enough product that if you do a large-scale implementation of it, you may well have somebody who is dedicated to doing the administration of the search facility in SharePoint, for example. So just keep that in mind as you go to, if you think of implementing SharePoint, that you may well need to get some additional help there to train those different people in the different aspects of SharePoint, all the way from the end users who should at least get something like a half-day intro to SharePoint. Here's how you navigate the product, all the way to the back-end IT folks who have to keep the thing running. Okay, well, I see we don't actually have any questions sitting in the queue here, so I will let this. I will end this webinar. Alex has posted in the chat stream there the URLs that will take you to the recording of this webinar, if you wish to see that later on. And as I said, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them to us. And if we don't have any other questions right now, I'll just say thank you for attending today. and hope we can see you at a later webinar.